Hi, welcome to another episode for our course here at Florida International University. I'm here with Philip Louisa, who is a graduate student in politics and international relations as well as religious studies, and he's one of our most talented students. We're really honored to have him and to talk a little bit about his academic background, his interest in interfaith work, and some of his research, so that you guys know kind of the excellent caliber of students and research that's happening here at the university in interfaith dialogue and interfaith relations. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Philip.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for having me. Your words are too kind. Again, yes, my name is Philip Louisa. I am in the religious studies program on the master's side with a combined international relations PhD. As the professor mentioned, I'm here for the long haul, and my interest in interfaith is what has kind of brought us together. Also, our path, kind of in terms of our backgrounds, are rather similar. I'm Tanzanian by birth. I came to the United States when I was 7 years old, but I spent the early childhood time of my life, about 4 to 5 years, between Tanzania and the United Kingdom and Wales, where my dad was pursuing a PhD at the University of Bangor. So during that time, I grew in terms of my interests in terms of the international stage, being that my earliest memory is being on a plane, being actually in an airport in Egypt. I forgot which one, but that's kind of like my earliest memory. And also just walking around, toddling around the University of Dar es Salaam, and as well as in Wales. So international relations has always been a key interest of mine, as well as religious studies, interfaith especially. My dad I was babysat by most of my dad's students. That's what I think that's how my dad kind of paid, got his kind of payment. So from an early age, my first babysitters were from Sri Lanka. So I remember having an early being brought into like Buddhist, thoughts, Buddhist ideas. I was introduced to actually Buddhist monks at around the age of 8, even though at the time I was growing up as Catholic. So being interfaith has always been a comfortable sphere that I've sat in. And so taking that, I think this has been kind of almost like a homecoming to actually be able to study it. And to actually make it a part of my career, where specifically it applies in my own research. Working with Professor Akhtar, we have been exploring youth agency in terms of conflict, and as it pertains to various challenging areas. Specifically, we're looking at Nigeria, the Nigerian youth, and then the north and southern divide when it comes to the Islamic Christian conflict, but then the multiple layers as it relates to ethnicity and how that kind of lends some complexity to what usually is looked at as a purely Christian Muslim conflict. As well as my interest goes into South Asia as well, specifically India, and the challenges of the smaller minority Christian population as they continue to integrate themselves and to grow within the subcontinent.
That's amazing. I mean, I think so. It's very interesting that your exposure early on in life allowed you to be able to kind of see multiple perspectives in terms of international relations and expose you to different cultures and religions. I think talk to us a little bit about your own spirituality.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your background there.
Yes. So yes, I grew up Catholic. Very deep, and many Tanzanians have a deep Catholic faith. I think we're split around the middle, Christian and Catholic, about 50%. And then there's a small a growing Protestant population as well. So from an early age, I always was going to church. My grandfather was a missionary, and kind of passed that on to me as well. And I really just kind of had a deep interest in the Catholicism. A lot of kids were kind of running away from church. I was always just fascinated with a lot of the stories that I would hear when in the biblical context, and also even though my dad has a very deeply scientific worldview, but he helped me understand how to look at religion from a critical lens. So we would have conversations of like, oh, was the world really created in 7 days? And I remember from an early age, my dad would tell me, well, 7 days to God may be different than 7 days to us. So maybe that's the way we should look at it. And so I've always been comfortable in the world of science and religion sitting very comfortably together, because my father is very religious and at the same time he's very deeply scientific. So it's always come as a strange idea that science and religion can't sit side by side, because that's just kind of how I was raised. So as I continued to grow, I kind of pulled away from my Catholic faith when I got a little bit older and I went to college. Many of us do. I would go to church still during like holy days like Easter and Christmas, but I starting to explore my own perspectives and kind of wanting to be more like everybody else around me. But I always found deep comfort within the church. Then later on, as I grew into the post college, I really truly started to kind of leave my Catholic faith, and I would say I was almost like I was a Catholic agnostic, where I did things more ritualistically, but it really didn't mean much to me outside of that. And then as I ended up moving to Florida, which point I was engaged to an individual who would become the mother of my child. And during that formative time, I kind of started to have some spiritual angst and difficulties and challenges, walk in terms of which I dealt with various issues in terms of understanding who I was. And through that period, I ended up really looking deeper into this idea of spirituality and asking myself and wanting something deeper. And in that sense is when I started walking toward where I am now, which is, Protestant. I left the Catholic faith and became a Protestant Christian. And in that perspective, I wanted a deeper and richer experience. And I became, I made Jesus Christ my Lord and Savior. And that started to shape my worldview even more. And then it pushed me further into discovering more of who I was. So for me, religion has allowed me to have a better understanding of who I am as an individual outside of what the world has kind of told me I should be. It has given me an authenticity and a perspective that I don't think I could have had without my faith.
Okay, very interesting. I know you're doing a little bit of work with Christians in India.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about what is the situation of Christians in India?
Okay, yes. So during my journey, I had the opportunity at a church here in South Florida, Church by the Glades, where I met up with a pastor named Pastor Shibu Josephs, originally from Kerala. And we started to speak because at that time I was starting to get more involved in wanting to understand Christian persecution in specifically South Asia and as well as Somalia. And while I was speaking to him, I didn't realize that he was in an area where there was a lot of Christian persecution, which is, and Professor, I'm going to say it wrong, Chhattisgarh in northern India. And so we started to speak, and he started telling me about the fact that he's been working to build a community of believers, with Christian believers in northern India, in that specific part of the world, which is right now rift with a lot of religious tensions. As kind of a background, there is an anti-conversion law that has been on the books in India for the last couple of years, and that has made it a little bit more difficult for the evangelical side of the Christian faith to kind of continue the practice of what many people see as proselytization. And this has led a level of suspicion in terms of many of the local communities, specifically outside of the periphery of the main, largely Hindu population in the southern parts of India. And so he kind of walked me through the history of the challenges of Christianity's growth in India. even though Christianity has been in India since its infancy, since the Thomas came to India. India is very well acquainted with Christianity, but it has struggled in terms of its growth. I think at the current term, it's like somebody will correct me too, something like 2% in terms of population. And so I've gotten more in spending time with him. I've gotten a better understanding of asking why has Christianity had such a deep struggle of growing, and then the increased persecution. Historically, I think at the time of independence, there was an attempt to kind of maintain a very semblance of peace and divide between the different religious groups. I think the challenges were more between between Muslim and Hindu, but Christians fell in kind of the crevice of the in-between in terms of challenges. But there is a continuing growth of the Christian population within India, and with Pastor Shibu, I had an opportunity to meet a lot of those people.
Interesting. And I know you're doing work on the situation in Nigeria.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about the relationship between Christians and Muslims, and kind of your general perspective on the challenges of sort of interfaith dialogue between Christians and Muslims.
Yeah. So this is a very sensitive particular topic, and my interest in India also kind of shed light in the fact that there's other areas where there is this complexity when it comes to the relationships between the multiple faith. So Nigeria is split along various ethnic groups, but also as well as an underlying factor as well as a religious split, with a largely northern Muslim population, and then the South made up of a majority Christian population, a mixture of Catholicism and Protestant Christianity. The difficulties that have been occurring for the last couple, actually since the infancy of independence, but more in the last 20 to 30 years, has been the advent of a form of, I'm not going to use the term correctly, Professor, not fundamentalist, but more, I would say like they have been a Boko Haram and other kind of splinter groups that have taken a perspective of Islam that is kind of extremist. Thank you, Professor. And in that sense, this group of people which have kind of taken advantage or exploited the challenging socioeconomic issues that are going on in northern Nigeria, have used this as an opportunity to kind of co-opt and really kind of recruit a lot of young people into their groups, and use this as a way to attack various groups, both Christians and Muslims. I want to make that very clear. It's been both Christians and Muslims that have been under attack, various communities. I know in the last, I think 3 years have been Fulani herdsmen who have gone and encroached down into the southern part, southeast part of Nigeria, and attacked a lot of Christian groups. So there has been in the last couple of weeks specifically a highlighting of the persecution of Christians that has been happening. And I think the number has been put up at like 100,000 in terms of deaths that have people who have been killed. Again, I always want to emphasize that yes, there is a persecution of Christians, but as Professor Akhtar and I have been going in terms of our talks, there is a layer of ethnic division that kind of underlies that. So it's not clearly just a pure Christian, a Muslim attack, but religion is used as a tool, as an excuse to act upon egregious differences and divisions that have been there for a while.
Yeah. And the political, economic, social grievances and historical sort of challenges, between these communities. So and it goes back to the colonial period and even before then as well. It's a big challenge. What about living here in Miami? How has your experience been in terms of engaging people of different faiths?
Yeah. So Miami is interesting. In the internal Christian discourse, we from the evangelical circles that I am in, Miami is looked as, there's a lot of churches in Miami, There is a large Christian people who call themselves Christians. What we do see it as is a rather underchurched area, which meaning the particular people do label themselves Christians, but a large percentage don't actually go to church. And this is a difficult or a reality, as I'll put it out there, in a lot of the United States. But it's a microcosm of that within the Miami area. The other interesting aspect of it is the fact that there's a growing desire to touch or to reach out in terms of connecting with indigenous or different religions that are outside of the historical context of which the Abrahamic religions, especially within the Afro-Caribbean diaspora as well. And so that's something that's been a growing, especially amongst the young people. There's been a desire, various religions that are kind of outside of the usual context, which has also influenced a lot of the Catholic and Christian perspectives as well. So that has lent itself to a very different kind of viewpoint than what I kind of was seeing in New York. Now in New York, it was very, very different, which was a greater kind of divide in terms of the non-religious and the people who were calling themselves either Catholic Christian, well, just label in this context as Christian. Florida, South Florida specifically, I think has more people who are more comfortable with calling themselves Christians than I saw in New York. The opportunities that I've seen here are the fact that because there's a greater comfort in having that dialogue outside of more, I would say, academia, there's an opportunity to kind of reshape the perspectives of what people see as traditional Christianity as more of a kind of encroachment into your life without any kind of real positive product. And so that's a lot of the work that I've been doing, working with many people in leadership, working with, I work in prison ministry. I work actively in other social areas just to kind of change the perspective that there's this idea that Christianity lends nothing to itself besides trying to damn you to, some kind of hell. But this, I think, when we, one thing Professor and I have in common is like when we study scripture, whether it's the Quran or whether it's the Bible, we see a very different perspective than what we see on the outside world. And that's kind of what I'm trying to lend to as well as in the interfaith community.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And to students here at the university or anywhere else that are interested in learning about other religious traditions, what would be your advice to them?
I would say, one, be very open-minded, explore for yourself, and I would say start with the scriptures, whichever religion that you're interested in. There's a lot of people, I would call them talking heads. Many of us go to a YouTube page or we go to a podcast. But I always say the best place to start with it is in the particular books. The books themselves speak very clearly. With those of us on the evangelical side, we believe that the Bible is ordained by the Word of God. So it in itself speaks to you, and the truth is through that word. And I think in the same very essence, in terms of Islam, when you read those particular books, they carry a rich history and they carry a rich narrative that's able to engage with the individual. And if you're open to it, the second part of that is, I say reach out to either your local pastor, priest, or imam, and sit down and ask, be open to asking questions. Again, trying to stray away from the talking heads that are out there who are trying to sway opinion, whether it's pro or con. But if you have that kind of open mindset, open to sitting down with a religious leader, many of them are more than happy to engage with you and sit down. And even one thing I've learned from Professor Akhtar is that there's many of us, I would say, practicing academics that are more than happy to sit down and talk about whichever particular faith that you're interested in without really trying to push you in any direction. We are open to the fact that we do practice our faith and we're very, happy and loving of our faith. But our key goal, I think, is always to bring an enriching environment to our student population in terms of being open and not just being pushed by the fact that there's a very negative narrative that's out there, and much of it because of on the Christian context, a nationalist idea that's been pushed out there, which I think differs very greatly than the perspective that you'll see in the scriptures.
All right. Cool. Thank you so much, Philip. I appreciate it.
Yes.
It's been a wonderful interview, and looking forward to working with you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.